leave your torches and pitchforks at home and let's discuss these terrific hot takes. Hey, how you doing? It is I, the Terrorific Lady, otherwise known as Brandy, and welcome to Retro Horror School, and a happy Friday to you. I'm sure you have some horror opinions like, horror has to be scary to be good, or Killer Clowns from Outer Space is the worst horror movie of all time. Those horror opinions that make people want to raise their torches and pitchforks and come at you. Those hot takes. And that is the best way I can describe what a hot take is. This is a discussion style video where I react to your horror hot takes. I don't really like the term hot take, but can't think of a better term. But what I did is I asked for your hot takes on Threads, on Instagram, on YouTube, and I've got them all together and I'm going to react to them in this video. In the future, I'll do a video where I share my own horror opinions or horror hot takes. But yeah, this video is all about me reacting to your horror hot takes. Some of the hot takes were repeats, so I combined them. Before I get started, if you have your own horror hot take that you want to share, drop it in the comments. Throw it at me. Your spiciest horror opinion, horror hot take. Let's get a respectful discussion going. But there we go. This one was the most shocking hot take, at least to me. Art the Clown is an F-tier monster. No real origin or backstory. Convoluted powers. He could do anything apparently. Has no weaknesses, no motivation. Why, what, how? He's basically a plot device for killing with no character. Maybe Terrifier 3 will solve those issues. Until then, other than the kills, the movie's shorts are meh. Why have you gotta hurt my heart like this? Why you gotta hurt my heart? For those of you out there, in case you know or didn't know, I am one of the biggest Terrifier fans out there. I thought that Terrifier and Art the Clown was a breath of fresh air to the horror genre, and I consider Art the Clown as an already iconic horror villain. I cannot consider him any kind of F-tier horror villain. Let me also dispute some of these points here. Yes, Art the Clown has no real origin or backstory, but neither did Michael Myers, not really. So he killed his sister for some reason. I really have no idea what it was. I think it has to go beyond just the fact that he thought she was a crappy babysitter or something like that. That's my line of thinking. Oh, you're a crappy babysitter, so I'm going to stab you. That's really not any kind of origin or backstory for Michael Myers. Later on down the line, he ends up almost becoming supernatural, so he also apparently can get shot or stabbed like numerous amount of times and still keep coming back. Even fire can't stop him, so he apparently has no weaknesses. And Michael Myers really doesn't have motivation. Dr. Loomis established that with his awesome ass monologue in the 1978 Halloween about how he was purely and simply evil.
I met this 6-year-old child with this blank, pale, emotionless face and the blackest eyes, the deathless eyes. I spent 8 years trying to reach him, and then another 7 trying to keep him locked up because I realized that what was living behind that boy's eyes was purely and simply evil.
And he's got a cool look, but he essentially kills for really no reason. And you could also kind of argue maybe that he has no character and that later movies ended up establishing that with the whole Cult of Thorn thing and him being Laurie Strode's brother. Oh, yeah. So to me, I don't think that art is a plot device for killing with no character. Because There is no good reason for any kind of slasher killer to be killing. Jason and Michael and Freddy, they're just killing, and killing. I don't know, but yeah, I, like Art, have to disagree with your take. He is not an F tier horror villain. Next up, we have a group of divisive horror hot takes that I have seen on social media that really tend to get people hot under the collar. I very much dislike the term elevated horror. There are some who think if it's not a smart horror movie, it isn't good, or if someone didn't like one, that they didn't get it. And yes, I blame Hereditary and Midsommar for this. Now, I love movies like Hereditary and Midsommar and The Witch and a lot of the horror movies that A24 has put out. But on the flip side, I like the doofus movies like the Friday the 13th franchise and Killer Clowns from Outer Space. And a lot of those like 80s and 80s inspired slashers. But yeah, I have seen some horror gatekeepers within the community do what you describe, that if they watched a movie like Hereditary or Midsommar and they didn't connect with it or they didn't think it was good, well, you just didn't get it. I also tend to think that elevated horror is a very gatekeepy term to be like, well, this is smart horror and all this other stuff over here is just, it's schlock, it's nasty, it's crap. Am not a big fan of the term elevated horror either. It stems from the term art house horror, to where it's kind of very experimental, almost like the movie. The one I could think of top of my head is Eraserhead. I would consider that kind of an art house horror film. Go David Lynch. But yeah, I don't like the term elevated horror at all, and I think people need to quit using it and stop being gatekeeping. Here's another hot take that I've seen get people hot under the collar. It drives me nuts when I see people condemn horror movies for not being scary. I've never felt that horror movies needed to be scary in order to be effective. And most of these people are pretty explicitly referring to a lack of jump scares in movies, which might be a common trope among horror movies, but it's far from the only trick a competent filmmaker has in their kit. Scares are overrated. So I do agree with this to a point. Yes, I do agree that some people tend to equate scary with jump scares, but to me, scary is subjective. What scares one person may not scare someone else. Like, I was terrified the first time I Saw, but I'm sure that there are other people who thought that Saw was absolute garbage. I mean, that's perfectly fine. Saw terrified me and scared me, and it may not scare anyone else. So what is scary is subjective. What fears, shocks, or disgusts people, which is the nature of horror, is also subjective. But I do agree. People also need to quit being gatekeepy and stop saying that this horror movie stinks because it doesn't fit my opinion of what I think is scary. Let's just stop with gatekeeping overall. I hate it. I've seen people get really furious about this, and it surprises me to no end. Horror movies don't need to be rated R to be scary. There are great PG-13 horror movies out there. Yes, yes, yes. I 100% agree with you. Few off the top of my head, the others: Drag Me to Hell, What Lies Beneath. Those are three just off the top of my head that are PG-13, still delivered to me what is an effective atmosphere and scares. But then you have some people that dismiss, like, a horror movie can't be PG-13. Like, well, yeah, yes, it can. And yes, it can be effective. So, long story short, I agree with that hot take. This one is a little bit of a longer one, but I've seen it come up, especially when it comes to the discussion around Terrifier films. Not sure if it's a hot take, but I'm tired of people like myself that grew up in the 80s watching Freddy, Jason, Myers, etc., constantly saying there can't be any new horror icons like Art the Clown. We had our icons like the generation before us. If Art and other new horror villains slash characters become horror icons for a new generation, we shouldn't tell them they are wrong. Everyone is welcome in this horror fandom as long as you be excellent to each other. As you stated, let's embrace new fans instead of gatekeeping the genre or telling them that they are wrong. Yes, I grew up in the 80s. I grew up around the big three, like slasher icons, but yes, there can absolutely be new horror icons. Just no question. And I think it's silly that people get so defensive about it that, oh, there's Jason and Michael and Freddy, but then like Art the Clown's taking attention away from all of these like iconic horror villains. How dare he? Like, there is plenty of room for all the horror icons, the ones that we know, and then there's plenty of room for the ones that are up and coming. If you think about it, each era had their own horror icon. So if you think about it, the 70s had Michael Myers, the 80s had Jason and Freddy, the 90s had Ghostface, and those are just a few examples. But I don't remember hearing people complaining about the rise of Ghostface. But then again, it was the 90s and social media wasn't really as prevalent then. I think Twitter didn't even come into play until 2006, if I remember correctly. But yeah, maybe that's why. Maybe people were complaining and I didn't realize it. But yeah, absolutely. We can make room for all these new up and coming horror icons. There's plenty of room for new icons. Come on, I say bring them on. This is one I've seen come up, especially when it comes to the discussion of maybe these extreme horror films or horror films with a lot of jump scares. Horror is more than jump scares and gore. A movie can have zero jump scares without a single drop of blood and still be valid horror. It's the broadest possible genre with a lot going in with a lot going on in it. Yes, I do agree. Horror is very equated with jump scares and with gore. Those are two staples of the horror genre. And I would take the jump scare point one step farther and say that pretty much every horror movie has a jump scare in it. It just depends on how well it's utilized, but that's a whole other topic altogether. But yeah, I do agree. There's horror movies that have absolutely terrified me that didn't have a single bit of gore in it at all. I agree with that hot take. Out of all the hot takes so far, do you agree? Do you disagree with them? Let me know. Let's carry on. So here's some hot takes that were a little bit unexpected. Clowns aren't scary. Replace any killer clown in almost any movie, except for Killer Clowns from Outer Space, with just a regular dude, and it would be improved. Kind of surprises me because people are afraid of clowns. Not everybody, but it's a legitimate fear. A lot of people are afraid of clowns, and probably they have the movie It to thank for that. But to me, it is an example of a movie that you couldn't really replace Pennywise with a regular dude and the movie have the same impact that it did. And essentially, Art the Clown is a bit of a regular dude under the makeup until he turns, comes back to life in the second one. But I don't watch lots of horror movies with clowns in them. To me, the clown has to be very, very compelling for me to get really invested in the movie. But yeah, I find clowns very creepy, mainly just because of the fact that in horror movies they're doing all the sadistic stuff while they have this smile painted on their face. It's a bit of a contradiction there of emotions and how someone is supposed to behave in these sick, twisted situations. They're not supposed to be smiling. But yes, I find clowns scary. I will have to disagree with you on that one, except for the killer clowns from the outer space. I think they're weirdly adorable for some reason. Here's another one. Horror hits differently after you have kids. The fear of a maniac in a hockey mask is nothing compared to the fear of not being able to pick up your kids after camp. Well, I don't personally have kids myself, so I can't connect to that one, but I do know that the movie Pet Sematary really bothers my mother because of that part where the little boy Gage gets hit by that semi truck. It just really, really bothered her. And when I asked her why, it's like because she could just imagine the fear as a parent is not being able to save your child. So that is an interesting hot take. I can agree with it from an outsider's perspective looking in. And I don't know if anybody who is a parent would feel differently. That's an interesting thought. I wonder if there are those kinds of people out there. But yeah, I can see where you're coming from the fact that my mom had that to say about Pet Sematary. Now we got some hot takes that have to do with horror tropes. We had a couple of hot takes come up about this. I'm going to show both of them on screen, but I'm only going to read one. We need more historically set horror and less idiots with no signals on their phones. Give them a good reason to be stuck in the middle of nowhere, unable to contact anyone, instead of relying on dead phone batteries. You can see the second take is also somewhat similar, but yeah, I'm not a fan of horror movies having the whole, oh, my phone died, oh, my phone doesn't work, even though I would buy it because I have been out in remote locations with my cell phone and the service absolutely stinks and I'm not able to get a signal. But I think that you would still be able to dial 911 on your cell phone, even if you're not getting like a really good signal. But even then, yeah, a cell phone not working out in a cell phone not working out in the middle of nowhere is a very tired trope that has been overdone, and I'm a little sick of seeing it. Quite a few of you had thoughts on music and musical stings used in horror movies as a trope. For instance, too many horror films and shows use a music strike to create a jump scare rather than making the moment actually scary. The second take is something similar, but it expands on the something walks by in the background with or without a musical sting that's just there for the audience. I hate musical stings when it's used to they build up the moment, build up the moment, build up the moment, and then there's a musical sting and nothing happens. Like there's no danger just of anything whatsoever. The only effective use I've seen of musical stings and jump scares in my opinion is in Insidious. James Wan can craft those types of jump scares really well without making it seem cheap or lazy. But yeah, I've seen far too many musical stings that use this kind of thing and I don't like it. So yeah, I agree with that take too. There are a lot of horror tropes that I wish and things used in horror that I wish would just go by the wayside, and I think that needs to be one of them unless you can use it effectively. This was kind of along the same lines as the cell phone trope, sort of. Horror movies have never truly resolved modern technology beyond lazy. It doesn't work because reasons. Some have tried leaning into modern tech, but are mostly cringe. It's why historical horror movies or ones with retro settings still dominate the genre. Oh, and we need to stop with the four friends go on a trip setup and with twists that constitute, but they are already dead. Ha ha ha. Yawn. Now, a modern horror movie has to really capture my attention for me to want to watch it. I think the last modern horror movie that I really ended up liking was Evil Dead Rise. So I can't really speak to the amount of modern horror movies that I have seen, but I do agree that we need to have a reason for technology not to work in a horror movie besides the fact that, oh, it just doesn't work. Now, maybe people are able to suspend disbelief in that way, and that is fine. I tend to have a hard time suspending disbelief in certain situations. And the four friends go on a trip setup. Well, there was more than four friends in this movie. The movie Wrong Turn that came out in 2003. Yeah, there are parts of that were very predictable, and I could see their deaths coming from a mile away. And I like backwoods horror, but that wasn't done. That wasn't done well at all. Yes, I tend to agree with you on both points. I've agreed with a lot of these horror hot takes, actually. Now we have some hot takes that have to do with movies. I'd be surprised if people think this was a hot take. Wes Craven's New Nightmare remains one of the horror's go-to movies. Greatest of all time. Greatest of all time? Here I am saying that. I don't know why people think it's a hot take, and here I am about ready to disagree with it. I'm sorry. Wes Craven's New Nightmare, to me, I felt was an overhyped movie. I went to it with very high expectations because I was told that I needed to see it. You need to see this movie. I need to see this movie. So the hype was really built up around it for me. And then when I watched it, I was disappointed at its execution. And I love the meta horror element. I felt that Wes Craven took it one step further with Scream. And I do understand and appreciate that people really love this movie and really embrace it and love the meta horror elements behind it. There were parts of the movie I really liked, but greatest of all time, greatest of all time, nah, at least I don't think so. Okay, this one. I wish producers would stop with the Amityville bullshit. Anything after the franchise, such as Amityville Bunny, Amityville Moon, and Amityville blah blah blah. Now there is a version including aliens. It needs to stop. There's an Amityville horror with aliens? Oh my gosh. But I've only ever seen the one with Ryan Reynolds that came out. What was it? 2005. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I've never been a big fan of the haunted house genre of horror. It is overdone, and there's not much you can do with it. Kind of like Exorcist movies. Beyond The Exorcist, you can't really do much more with that genre. But unfortunately, I wouldn't say unfortunately, it may be fortunately to some people, but as long as movies in a franchise keep making money, they're going to keep making more and more movies. So I get wanting it to stop, especially if you don't like a lot of the movies that come after it, but they are most likely more than not going to keep making them as long as there is an audience for them. So yeah, what can you do? My hot take: slasher movies without a supernatural element are boring. Really? Really? Aw. Seriously? You could call Alien a slasher in space. It had a sci-fi element. It didn't have a supernatural element. Halloween, the first one, 1978, it didn't have a supernatural element to it. Texas Chainsaw Massacre didn't have a supernatural element to it. And all of those were movies that I liked and I was engaged in, and I didn't find them boring at all. So it may be your preference that you like your slasher movies to have a supernatural element. I don't mind slasher movies that have a supernatural element, but like if you take a supernatural element out of a slasher, I don't find it boring. So yeah, fight me on that one. I don't agree with that. I don't agree that all slasher movies have to have a supernatural element to be considered good. Tobe Hooper should be as celebrated and studied as John Carpenter or Wes Craven. To distill his career to 2 movies and try to rob him of credit for one of them is ludicrous. Yes. I don't understand why Tobe Hooper as a director is not more looked at and studied, and I am eventually going to get around to doing a ranking of all of his movies that is way on down the line. Hopefully not really far on down the line, because I've got other rankings and things planned. But yeah, he should be as celebrated and studied. He has some good movies. His movies, he's directed more than, I believe the two movies you're talking about are Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Poltergeist. Because people try to say, well, he didn't direct Poltergeist. It's too slick looking. It's got the Steven Spielberg executive producer thing behind it, but he still directed it. Halloween parts 4 through 8 are terrible. How dare you say Halloween Resurrection? Because that's part 8, if I'm counting correctly. How dare you say that movie's terrible? It's awesome. It's awesome. Whenever you've seen Busta Rhymes defeating Michael Myers of Kung Fu, you've seen everything. You have reached the pinnacle of Halloween. You can go no further. But I can't say all of them are terrible though, because I liked part 4, and I thought H2O was fine. If you want to see how I ranked parts 5 and 6, you can watch my Halloween franchise ranking. But yeah, no, not all of them are terrible, and especially not Halloween Resurrection. I'll go fisticuffs with anybody all day who disagrees with me on that. This one is a very specific kind of horror opinion or hot take. In the original Hellraiser, Kirsty never actually opens the box to summon the Cenobites. She starts to, pushes her finger inside, and the thing short circuits. That's why the engineer turns up. I believe it was trying to reclaim a broken configuration. It's been a little bit since I've seen the first Hellraiser. I mean, I've read The Hellbound Heart, which the movie is based on, and I'm trying to remember what actually happens as to how the Cenobites get summoned. I don't remember if she tries to solve the cube or if she does as you describe, but I'll just leave this as I can see where it could be open to interpretation. So we've talked about a lot of hot takes so far. So if you have any thoughts about any of them so far, you can drop your thoughts down below. We're going to go over the potpourri of hot takes. Oh, the little mishmashing of hot takes here. A lot of people have issues with Halloween Ends, but I loved it. Also, I have no issue when a remake is announced. Never. I treat a film like a play. Give me a new interpretation, new screenwriter, director, cast, etc. If it works, great. I have another film to watch. If it sucks, oh well. I still have the original on Blu-ray, which is untouched by their attempt. Can't agree with you on Halloween Ends there. I didn't particularly care for it. But in terms of remakes, I'm a little bit more open to them now. Like, I used to be very much up in arms about how the original should never be touched. And I still think about that for some movies. John Carpenter's The Thing. I don't think a remake can ever touch that, ever. But yes, I'm a little bit more open to the ideas of remakes now, and I treat them exactly just as you described. Films that are hopeless aren't scary. I think me watching Seven at around 13 or 14 made me like a bit of the endings where it's bleak and hopeless and it just ends where nobody is a winner. For instance, Eden Lake, that's a movie that I could think of off the top of my head where I will never watch it again. And it had one of those kinds of hopeless endings, and it sickened and shocked and disgusted me. But man, I know a lot of times we want the person to come out on top after all the shit that they went through, but I do know in a lot of instances it could also be realistic for that not to happen. Just look at the alternate ending of Get Out as another example. The alternate ending would have ended up with the lead character being in prison after defending himself. So, yeah, endings that are hopeless, they tend to frighten me a lot. Outside of horror comedies, I can't stand all the Schadenfreude. I've never been able to pronounce that word. I don't watch horror to see characters I'm supposed to hate being brutally slaughtered. That's not scary. See someone I can like, understand, or at least to whom I can relate. in peril, that's scary. Yeah, the trope of the douchebag just being there for killer fodder. Yes, it's a trope that has been constantly used, but it's a trope that I don't care being in horror movies. That's my own personal preference. But I do agree with the fact that I like connecting and empathizing with characters in horror. And yes, I do find hopeless endings scary, but I also like rooting for the final person to just like make it out of there alive. So agree with you on that one. I like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but it just isn't connecting with me. I don't like the characters. It's slow, and I think it's overhyped. Not bad, but not that good. I had the same thoughts about this movie for a very, very long time. It took me multiple watches to get to the point where I'm like, oh, I actually like it now. But I can understand that hot take because the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is not everybody's cup of tea. If you really want a hot take, try saying that the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a slasher. I said that once on Threads, and I got a lot of people that agree with me. I got a lot of people that disagree with me, respectfully and politely. And I have some people that just came at me with their torches and pitchforks. So apparently that is a huge hot take. Probably also along with disliking the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, because I've seen some people get pissy about that too, but I'm not one of them. I'm generally not very interested in horror sequels. Part of what makes horror great is the unexpected. And as a continuation of that, there are too many sequels and franchises, and they water down what makes the original movies good. Normalize making one awesome movie, never explain the weird and cool stuff that happened in it, and moving on to make something different. I don't mind horror sequels so much, and I don't mind franchises so much, but there's got to be a purpose behind it. I know a lot of the purpose is, hey, the previous one did really well, so let's make another one so we can continue to make more money. And that's mainly coming from the studio's perspective and the business perspective, and I can understand that. But this is a more modern example, like Smile 2. I have no idea how they're going to be able to pull off a sequel to Smile. I really don't know. Maybe I'll be proven wrong. I don't know. But yes, I don't mind sequels. They just have to have a purpose. I don't mind franchises, but I feel that they also have to have a purpose. And now we're going to end with a laundry list of hot takes. Alien Resurrection is greater than Alien 3. Didn't really like either one of those. Malignant is James Wan's best movie. No, not really. I have to think it's either Saw or Insidious. Fright Night 2011 is greater than Fright Night 1985. Hi, doggy. I haven't really seen either one of those, so I can't say. The Purge movies are mostly good, actually. I like the Purge movie, the first one, up to a point. I haven't seen any of the others. House of a Thousand Corpses is mostly bad, actually. It's not to everyone's taste. I didn't mind House of a Thousand Corpses. I thought it was fine. Don't Breathe 2 is mostly good, actually. I haven't seen it again, so I can't say. The relentless and killable force in horror video games distracts from the actual gameplay and makes those games not fun. Both those games are fun. I don't know what you're talking about. And just in general, remakes are fine. Actually, I will not be taking questions at this time. Yes, I agree with you on the remakes thing. And I won't be taking questions at this time either, but I'll be asking them. Thank you so much for watching this Retro Horror School video. I hope you enjoyed me reacting to your hot takes, but I'm never going to get over the Art the Clown one. Art the Clown person, you're banned. Just kidding. Or am I? Please give this video a like, a thumbs up, share it with fellow horror fans and people who love learning about horror. That really does help. And if you have not already subscribed, consider subscribing and joining this awesome Retro Horror School of awesomeness, and hit the bell so that way you never miss a retro horror class. I'm going to throw up some more videos that I think you might like. And sadly, the class is dismissed, everybody, for now. But I will see you next time. Bye.